She stood in the middle of my living room, the house I paid for, the house I raised my son in for 31 years, and she pointed her finger in my face and said, "You need to start getting used to the basement. This house is for people who are useful." And then she started throwing my things out the front door. My photo albums, my late husband's watch, my reading glasses, all of it scattered across the front yard like trash. But here's what she didn't know. I had a button, and I pressed it. 2 minutes later, the police arrived. And 2 months after that, everything she thought she'd stolen from me was gone. Every single bit of it. My name is Gloria. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything and then got it all back.
Let me take you back, because you need to understand what this house means to me before you can understand what she took. My husband, Robert, and I bought that house in 1989. It was a modest 3-bedroom colonial on Maple Creek Drive in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy. But we scraped together every dollar we had for that down payment. Robert was working double shifts at the plant. I was substitute teaching and selling handmade quilts on the weekends just to make ends meet. We brought our son, Daniel, home from the hospital to that house. We taught him to ride his bike in that driveway. We painted his bedroom 3 different times because he kept changing his mind, first blue, then green, then a color he called Galaxy Gray, when he was 16 and thought he was very deep. I smiled every single morning waking up in that house. Robert passed away in 2019. Pancreatic cancer? It was fast, 3 months from diagnosis to the end. And when he was gone, that house became the only piece of him I had left. His chair was still by the window. His garden was still in the backyard. His handwriting was still on the inside of the pantry door where we used to measure Daniel's height every birthday. Daniel was devastated. We both were. But we had each other. Or at least, I thought we did. Daniel met Vanessa about a year after his father died. She was 34, he was 38, and from the moment I met her, I told myself to be fair. Grief can make you suspicious of new people. I knew that. So I tried. Lord knows I tried. She was beautiful, confident, and she had a way of talking that made you feel like she was always the smartest person in the room, and she wanted you to know it. The first thing I noticed was small. She rearranged my kitchen. I came downstairs one Saturday morning and every cabinet had been reorganized. She'd thrown away things she called clutter. One of those things was a ceramic rooster my mother had given me 30 years ago. When I mentioned it, she smiled and said, "Gloria, you really need to learn to let go of things." I let it go. For Daniel. Then came the comments at dinner. Little jabs dressed up as jokes. "Oh, Gloria, you're still using that recipe? How retro." Or, "Daniel, your mom really doesn't like change, does she?" Always with a smile. Always in front of company. Daniel would laugh nervously and change the subject. He never defended me. Not once. But I told myself, newlyweds. They're still finding their footing. Give it time. I gave it time. What I got back was something I never could have prepared for. It started on a Tuesday in March, about 8 months after they got married. I was sitting in the sunroom reading when I heard the front door open. I assumed it was Daniel coming home early from work. But then I heard a voice I didn't recognize. A man's voice. Deep, laughing, comfortable. I walked into the hallway and stopped cold. Vanessa was standing there with a man I had never seen in my life. He had his jacket hanging over his shoulder. She was touching his arm. They were laughing about something. When she saw me, she didn't flinch. She didn't blush. She just looked at me the way you look at something mildly inconvenient, like a speed bump. "Gloria," she said. "This is Marcus. He's a colleague." Marcus nodded at me like I was the guest and he was the homeowner. I said, "Vanessa, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" She sighed, actually sighed, and told Marcus to make himself comfortable in the living room. My living room. In the hallway, I kept my voice calm. I said. Who is this man, and why is he in this house? She crossed her arms and looked at me with this expression I'll never forget, like I was a child she was tired of explaining things to. Marcus is important to me, she said. And since Daniel is never here anyway, I need company. You don't own this house anymore, Gloria. Daniel does. And what Daniel's wife says goes. I felt the floor shift under my feet. Daniel and I both live here, I said quietly. Robert and I built this life. And that's when she said it. The words I will never, ever forget. Robert is dead. And you're becoming pretty useless yourself. Honestly? You should start getting used to the basement. This house is for people who contribute something. I stood there, 67 years old, in the house where I buried my husband's memory, where I raised my child, where I'd given every decade of my adult life, and I couldn't speak. She walked back to Marcus like the conversation was over. But what happened next changed everything. I went upstairs and called Daniel. He answered on the third ring, distracted, clearly busy. I told him what had just happened. I told him there was a man in our home. A man Vanessa had introduced as a colleague, but whose comfort in our living room told a very different story. There was a long silence. And then my son, my Daniel, the boy I sat up with through fevers and nightmares and broken hearts, said to me, Mom, don't make this into something it's not. Vanessa has a lot of friends. You're just not used to sharing space. I thought that was the worst moment of my life. I was wrong. That night, I sat in Robert's old chair by the window, and I talked to him. I know that sounds like something a lonely old woman does in a movie. But I talked to him. I told him what was happening. I asked him what I was supposed to do. The house felt foreign. Like the walls had shifted 2 inches in every direction, and nothing quite lined up the way it used to. I started staying in my room more. I stopped cooking Sunday dinners because Vanessa would make comments about the sodium content, or say Marcus preferred a different cuisine. Yes, Marcus was there on Sundays now too. Regularly. Openly. Like he lived there. I heard them laughing downstairs while I ate soup alone in my room. I lost 12 pounds in 2 months. My doctor told me my blood pressure was dangerously high. My friend Ruth kept telling me to leave, to go stay with my sister in Cincinnati. But I couldn't leave. If I left, I felt like I was leaving Robert. Like I was abandoning the last real thing I had of him. So I stayed. And I started paying attention. I started writing things down. Dates. Times. What I saw. What was said. Every incident. Every cruelty. Every time Marcus came through that front door like he owned the place. I didn't know why I was writing it down yet. But something in me, something older and quieter and stronger than my grief, told me to keep records. Then one evening, I was coming down the hall when I overheard Vanessa on the phone. She didn't know I was there. Once we get her out, the house is ours. Daniel won't fight it. You know how he is. She's old, she's alone, what's she going to do? No, Marcus, I've already looked into it. Legally she has no claim. It's in Daniel's name. All we have to do is make her uncomfortable enough to leave on her own. I stood in that hallway with my hand over my mouth. This wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. This was a plan. I called my sister Carol that night, and I also called her husband, who happened to be a retired real estate attorney. Gloria, he said, after I explained everything, do you still have the original deed to that house? I did. And was your name ever removed from it? And that's when I discovered the truth. When Robert passed, the house had transferred, but not the way Vanessa thought. My brother-in-law walked me through the documents I had in a fireproof box in my closet. Documents I hadn't looked at in years. Robert, God bless him, had added a specific clause to the deed before he died. He'd had a will updated 3 months before his diagnosis, almost like he'd known. The house could not be transferred or sold without my explicit written consent. My name was on that deed as a life estate holder. Vanessa had done her research. But she hadn't done enough of it. I owned that house as much as Daniel did. Legally. Documented. Ironclad? I didn't say a word to anyone. I just started making phone calls. I called a family attorney. I called a domestic abuse hotline, because yes, what was happening to me counted. An elder law specialist told me that what Vanessa was doing had a name: elder coercion. It was documented. It was illegal. And I called the non-emergency police line and asked them what I should do if someone was harassing me in my own home. They told me to document everything, which I had, and that if at any point I felt threatened, I should press the emergency button on my medical alert device. I'd had that little white button on a lanyard for 2 years. Daniel had bought it for me after Robert died, and I'd mostly ignored it. I started wearing it every single day. The day it all collapsed was a Thursday afternoon in May. Vanessa had been on the phone with Marcus all morning. I could hear her laughing, that same bright performative laugh she used when she wanted people to notice her. Around 2 o'clock, the front door opened. Marcus walked in carrying a duffel bag. I came downstairs. "What is that?" I asked, nodding at the bag. Vanessa stepped between us. Her eyes were sharp. "Marcus is going to be staying here for a while," she said. "We're converting the guest room." "The guest room," I repeated slowly, "is next to my room." "Yes," she said. "Which is why we think it makes more sense for you to move your things to the basement. It's private. It's quiet. You won't have to deal with anyone." And then she did it. She walked to the hallway closet where I kept some of my things, my winter coats, a box of photographs, Robert's old cardigan that I couldn't bring myself to donate, and she started pulling them out. She dropped them by the front door. Then she opened the front door and started setting them on the porch. Marcus stood there watching, arms crossed, like this was all perfectly reasonable. I looked at Robert's cardigan on the porch railing. And I pressed the button. I pressed it calmly. Quietly. Without saying a word. Vanessa kept talking, something about how I needed to accept reality, but I wasn't listening anymore. 2 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up. The officer knocked. I opened the door myself. "Ma'am, we got an alert from this address. Is everything all right?" I said. "Officer, I am a legal co-owner of this property. My belongings have been removed from the home without my consent, and a man who does not live here has been moved in without my agreement. I have documentation of ongoing harassment and coercion." I had the folder in my hand. I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks. Vanessa's face went the color of old chalk. This is a misunderstanding," she started. The officer looked at Marcus and his duffel bag. He looked at my belongings on the porch. He looked at me, a 67-year-old woman, calm, with a folder of dated records and a deed with my name on it. "Ma'am," he said to Vanessa, "I'm going to need to see some identification and proof of your legal right to modify living arrangements in this property." She didn't have it. Because legally, she couldn't make that call without me. Marcus left that night. Voluntarily. He didn't want to be anywhere near what was coming. Daniel came home to 2 officers, a very pale wife, and his mother sitting in Robert's chair with her hands folded, completely steady. What came next was hard. I won't pretend it wasn't. Daniel was angry at first, at me, if you can believe it. He accused me of ambushing his wife. We said things to each other that you can't unsay overnight. But the attorney I'd hired sent him a letter the following week. A detailed letter. With dates, recordings I had legally made in common areas of my own home, and a summary of exactly what his wife had been doing and planning. He didn't call me for 4 days after he read it. On the 5th day, he showed up at the house while Vanessa was out. He sat down across from me at the kitchen table. He looked like he hadn't slept. He looked like his father, the same eyes, the same jaw, the same expression Robert used to get when he knew he'd made a mistake and didn't know how to carry it. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry." He didn't make excuses. He just said he was sorry. We sat at that kitchen table for 2 hours. We talked about Robert. We talked about how grief can make you desperate for someone to lean on, how that desperation can blind you. We talked about how I should have come to him sooner, and he should have listened sooner. It wasn't a movie ending. It was messy and tearful and real. Vanessa moved out 3 weeks later. The divorce was finalized within the year. She got very little. Her own attorney had apparently told her that the coercion documentation was not a position she wanted to defend in court. And Marcus? Turns out Vanessa wasn't the only wife he was keeping company. His own wife, yes, he was married, filed for divorce the same month. He lost his job shortly after when his employer learned about some financial impropriety that his now ex-wife's attorney had uncovered. I didn't arrange any of that. I didn't have to. Some things take care of themselves. I repainted Daniel's old bedroom last summer. Not galaxy gray this time. A soft sage green that Robert always wanted but never got around to. Daniel comes for dinner every Sunday now. Sometimes he brings someone new, a quiet woman named Patricia who asked me about the ceramic rooster on my shelf and actually listened to the answer. I still wear the little white button. Not out of fear anymore. Just as a reminder. A reminder that I had a choice every single day during those months. I could have broken. I could have packed a bag and walked away from everything Robert and I had built. There were nights I almost did. But I chose to be steady. I chose to document instead of react. I chose to know my rights instead of accept someone else's version of my worth. Here's what I want you to take from this. Your history is not a burden. It is a foundation. And no one, gets to tell you that the life you built is no longer yours simply because they want it. People who try to make you feel small are counting on you to believe them. Don't. Know what you own. Know what you're worth. And if you ever need to, press the button. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've ever been made to feel invisible in your own home, you are not alone.